Well, finally, yes. Screencast 5 decided to work again, so that makes me relatively happy. And, you know, today is Monday, and this is the latest I've ever done a canned Horton. Today is Monday, November the 16th, and this is my first of two canned Hortons I'll do today for AP Euro because I like keeping a day ahead. But yeah, so today let's talk a little bit about nasty version short. There it is. No, there it is, and there it is. Yes, should be on Roman numeral 15 in your study guide. Tell me, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. I can't buy a break today. I mean, it's like during the day, pardon me. It's like during the day, I can never get anything done today. Anyway, all right. So Great Britain was the heart of the Industrial Revolution. That's where it began, and in Britain it actually began in the 18th century, whereas in most of the rest of Europe it began later. London was Britain's largest city at the time. In fact, it had 2 million people living in it in the middle of the 19th century. It had newspapers. London allowed and even encouraged the wealthy to imitate the nobility in both their dress and their lifestyle. And so, unlike the rest of Europe, where even if you had money, you could not dress like the nobility, in England there was that freedom. Taxation in Britain was heavy but fairly well distributed. British society was relatively mobile. Now, I say relatively because in Britain, it was more mobile than. You say, what does that mean? The society was mobile. Well, it meant that if you were born into poverty in Great Britain, you could actually, through pluck and luck and industry and whatever, you could actually find yourself, by the time you became an adult, you could be in the middle class, the upper middle class, or even the wealthy. But even with all the opportunities in Great Britain, there were more opportunities still in the New World. But I mean, in the New World, it was a ladder that went up as well as down. Yeah, many people who came to the New World failed, and some succeeded. All right, so as it says there, British society was relatively mobile. If a person can make money, he could improve his status in society. A situation that did not exist in most of the rest of the continent, with the possible exception of the Netherlands. Roman numeral 16. The industry that powered the Industrial Revolution was the textile industry. Textiles, clothing manufacturing. This industry shows that in the early days of this revolution, it was a rural revolution, and it was. Once again, there are two industrial revolutions. Remember, two. There's the first revolution and the second revolution. The first revolution was focused around textiles, and also another important differentiate, which is on your test, was the power source. The first industrial revolution for power used water power. And that meant that in the first industrial revolution, most of the so-called factories, production units, would be located out in the country somewhere next to a body of water, a stream, a river. that could turn the paddle wheels. And so, yeah. Factory production was geared to one and sometimes two families living out in the country. That was the basic unit of production. You'd have a little tiny business, a cottage industry, out next to a stream, and the stream would turn a wheel, and the wheel would drive the weavers, or the things that turned thread, cotton to a lesser degree, wool into fabric. So the spinning wheel was the basic unit of production. The demand for cotton textiles exceeded production, because and remember, cotton is not grown in England. Cotton is not grown in Europe at all. Cotton at that time was grown in the American South. Later on, it'll be grown in places like Egypt and India, but that didn't matter. The problem was that these British small-time factories could not produce enough textiles, cotton textiles, to meet the demand. Cotton textile producers could not produce the thread necessary to supply the industry. James Kay later on will invent the flying shuttle, which increased the productivity of weavers. In 1765, James Hargreave invented the spinning jenny, a device that could produce thread. In other words, further automating the process for making textiles. Richard Arkwright's water frame, patented in 1769, allowed the use of water power to produce a cotton-only thread that could stand up to the wear and tear of wearing. Cotton production increased by 800% between 1780 and 1800. A lot of this, though, was the result of Eli Whitney and the cotton gin. Yeah. The Industrial Revolution had commenced in earnest by the 1780s. That's in England, by the way. The first cotton mills were located in the country and were limited to places where you could harness water power. Okay, Roman numeral 17. The invention of the steam engine. The steam engine, once again, one of the greatest inventions ever. James Watt, the guy who finally invented the steam engine, is not listed amongst the top 10 most important people, but there could be a debate as to maybe he should be. Okay. The invention of the steam engine was the first time man had harnessed a seemingly inexhaustible source of inanimate power. The steam engine. Because now at first, the first steam engines were driven by burning wood. But the problem with burning wood is that you can't get the fire hot enough to produce enough steam quickly enough. And that was a pain. But later on, they began using coal. Coal burns hotter than wood. And so that proved to be a more satisfactory source of power. It also saved lots of trees in Great Britain. I mean, by the time James Watt had invented the steam engine, I won't say that Britain was denuded of trees, but there weren't very many left. In fact, you have to remember that to get wood for the British to build their navy, the British had to buy timber from other parts of the world, Russia, North Carolina. So, but anyway, this steam engine was driven by coal power. And by the way, coal-powered steam and coal power are two things that hallmark the second industrial revolution: steam and coal power. Okay? The first usable steam engine was created by Thomas Newcomen. But this model was very untransportable and very inefficient. It was not workable. That is why, even though Thomas Newcomen built a steam engine before James Watt, it is James Watt who gets credit for the invention, the patenting of a steam engine. that works. James Watt, who separated the condenser from the piston and made it more efficient. Now, I should have mentioned this before, but the nature of steam power. Steam power is much more powerful than running water over a stream and turning a wheel. Much more powerful. What is steam power? Well, to get an idea of how powerful steam is, remember that steam power is produced when you heat water molecules to the point where it boils. And when it boils, what happens is water goes from being a liquid to being a gas. And when it becomes a gas, there is a tremendous explosion of energy. You say, well, how think of this. Now, most everybody today microwaves popcorn, but it doesn't matter if you microwave popcorn or if you use a pan with a small bit of oil in the bottom of the pan. The purpose of putting popcorn in a pan with just a little bit of oil, that's all you need. The oil makes the popcorn really, really hot. And inside each kernel of popcorn is a tiny bit of moisture, water. And when you heat that popcorn above 212, on the inside of the popcorn, above 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees centigrade, the water inside that popcorn goes from being a liquid to being a gas. And when it becomes a gas, it explodes. And when it explodes, you have, voila, popcorn that you can eat. And if you look at popcorn, you can tell, you can see that it's exploded. Well, imagine if you could harness that power and turn it into a machine. Well, that was the problem. Here's the thing. The Greeks knew about the power of steam. The ancient Greeks, before the birth of Christ, 500 BC, knew about the power of steam. No one could produce a machine that was efficient enough to harness the power of steam until James Watt. And you have to remember that and this is on your test, that steam engine was built because, as it says there in part 1, the design of James Watt called for exactly produced metallic parts, because you have to have these parts that fit exactly correctly, pistons that slide and keep relatively airtight spaces within the engine to make it run fairly efficiently. And it says, okay, so the design called for exactly fitting metallic. So you had to have a foundry that could turn out those kind of parts, small parts. Yeah, the technology. The engine did not spread quickly until 1800, when Watt retained exclusive patent rights and made improvements. The machine could run more rapidly and could be used for pumping water, running cotton mills, and yes, running trains. Steam power was much more powerful than anything that mankind had ever produced. Muscle power, animal muscle power, water or wind power is much more powerful than those things. And it could be produced whenever you needed it. And here's another thing that I don't have written down there, but it is worthy on your test. Steam power is still important to this very day. It really is. Because steam power, for example, you ever wonder where the power for these lights come, or your electricity that you plug into so conveniently without even thinking about it until there's a windstorm and power lines get knocked down? Where that comes from? Well, down in Gallatin County, there is a plant that takes water out of the river and puts it into several boilers, uses coal, and then heats that water to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The steam is then forced through a turbine that turns a generator, and the generator produces electricity. Yeah. And yeah, that's it. And by the way, there's also another generator that's just across the Ohio River in Ohio on the 275 bridge. And those produce electricity. The point of the matter is, steam power, test question, is still a prime mover for the industry, all industry. Whether it's, most companies, most factories do not use steam powered engines anymore, but they use the electricity that comes from a steam powered generator, steam powered turbine. Yes, so it's still important. By the early 19th century, steam had become the prime mover of industry. So, iron is the chief element of the Industrial Revolution. Cotton was that should be the first in the second Industrial Revolution. Second Industrial Revolution, yes. Remember, there are two. During the early 18th century, British iron makers produced less than 25,000 tons of iron annually. Three factors held back the production of metals. Charcoal was used instead of, okay, let's learn a new word, shall we? Coke. It's a refreshing drink. Charcoal is what, when you have a barbecue outside and you use charcoal briquettes to heat your whatever, meat or vegetables on the grill. It's carbonized wood. It's wood that has been partially burnt. Yeah, charcoal is carbonized wood. Coke, on the other hand, is on your test. Coke is the same thing, only it's made of coal. Coke is carbonized coal. Coke is where they've taken coal and they have heated it to a high temperature to where it carbonizes. And you say, what's the advantage then? Well, if you use coke in the heating process of melting iron, just like using charcoal when you cook your chicken on the grill, it produces a much more even and a much more intense heat flame. And the more intense heat is better to melt the iron, and it makes it easier to remove all the impurities from the iron. And in fact, one of my best friends in Alabama just retired from a place called ABC, Alabama Byproducts Corporation. What do? They make coke. That's all they do. They make coke that steel manufacturing industries can use in production of steel. That use it in the production of steel. Yeah, and it's down in Birmingham. That's where he worked, and I was happy that he retired because you see, when you mess around with coal a lot, coal, as you know, has a lot of carcinogens, and so yeah, he has retired since then. But yeah, he said that he used to. They had these ovens, these ginormous ovens for turning coal into coke. Again, coke is carbonized steel. Um, anyway, coal is carbonized coal. No. Coke is carbonized coal. Coke is carbonized coal, but it's used in turning iron into steel. Charcoal wood came from wood, and wood was scarce. That was one problem. Also, the bigger problem was that charcoal burned at a lower temperature than coke, and so the refinement process was not as good. Until the invention of the steam engine, insufficient blasts of hot air could be achieved in the furnaces to produce coke. And by the way, let's learn something new. The demand for iron was limited. However, when the first two things were eliminated, so was the third. Yeah, meaning that using coke instead of coal, using steam engine to make the blast furnace hotter, and yeah. So, and I mean, this is here's something. Okay, here's something. Let's learn about two things. What do you need? Three things. You need iron, you need coal, you need limestone. Yeah, those three things. What do you need to make steel? Three things. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals, the premier football program in the NFL, just played the Steelers yesterday. Have you ever noticed the Steelers logo on their helmets? Yeah. You ever notice that? You ever just some of you? I know in every Ryle class, there's always Steeler fans. That could go to many things, but I won't get into that. But yeah, they're always Steeler fans. And I always ask them, you ever looked at the Steeler logo? And they go, oh, yeah, sure. And I said, well, have you ever wondered? And I asked them, what does it look like? And on the Steelers logo, there are three little diamonds, one gold, one black, one red. And I said, have you ever wondered what those three diamonds represented? Of course, they have no idea. And the answer is that. The three products needed for making steel. Yeah. All right. So coke, which is made from coal, was abundant in England. Henry Court improved the smelting process by allowing more slag. Slag are impurities that you find in iron, which I saw on somebody's test. I swear it. So improve the smelting process by allowing more slag to be removed. Slag, impurities that you find, carbon, basically. Yeah. You see, once again, the difference between iron and steel is that iron is brittle. Steel, although not as strong as iron, is resilient. He also improved a rolling mill that could produce continuously moving steel that was easier to shape into usable forms. Okay, I'm going to stop there. You guys have enough to do, and we'll continue tomorrow. Okay? So, yeah, let's pick up tomorrow.